On a quiet street in Wilmington, Delaware, there's a low, beige, two-story building that you would walk past without a second glance. No grand sign, no logo you'd recognize. From the outside, it looks like the kind of place that might hold a dentist's office or a regional insurance branch. But this single, unremarkable building is the official, legal home of more than 300,000 companies. Apple has lived here, so has Google, Coca-Cola, Walmart, American Airlines. At one point or another, some of the largest corporations on earth have called this exact address home. They don't make anything here. No one ships products from here. Most of their executives have never set foot inside. And yet, on paper, this is where they exist. The address is 1209 North Orange Street. And to understand why 1/3 companies claim to live inside it, you have to understand one of the most quietly powerful systems in the modern economy. A system hiding in plain sight, behind a word you've seen 1,000 times and never thought about it. Incorporated. Delaware is one of the smallest states in America. Just over 1 million people live there, but more than 2 million companies are registered there. That's roughly 2 corporate entities for every single human resident. About 2/3 of all Fortune 500 companies are incorporated in Delaware, and in a single recent year, more than 8 of every 10 US companies that went public on a stock exchange did so as Delaware corporations. Look at the fine print on almost any American product, app, or stock you own, and you'll likely find 3 letters: INC. More often than not, that INC is a Delaware one. So here's the question that doesn't add up. Why would a company headquartered in California, selling products made in China, with customers all over the world, choose to exist in a tiny state on the East Coast that it has nothing to do with? The answer isn't an accident. It's the result of a century-long strategy, and Delaware has been winning at it for so long that it now controls something close to the legal backbone of American business. First, let's clear up the building itself, because 300,000 companies in one office sounds impossible. And it is if you picture 300,000 desks. The trick is that incorporating in a state has almost nothing to do with operating there. When you create a company in the US, you have to choose a state to legally form it in. And that state doesn't have to be where your offices, factories, or employees are. The only catch is that you need a physical address in that state to receive legal documents, lawsuits, official notices, and government email. That role is filled by something called a registered agent, a company whose entire business is being the official mailbox for other companies. 1209 North Orange Street is the headquarters of one of the biggest registered agents in the country. So those 300,000 companies aren't working there. They're forwarding their legal mail there. The building isn't an office, it's an address for rent at a scale of an entire economy, which brings us back to the real question. Renting an address is easy. You can do it anywhere, so why does everyone choose Delaware? It wasn't always the king. A little over a century ago, the most popular state to incorporate in wasn't Delaware at all. It was New Jersey. In the late 1800s, New Jersey wrote unusually permissive laws that let corporations do things other states forbade, and the giant trusts and monopolies of the era flocked there. New Jersey grew rich on the fees. Then, around 1913, under a reform-minded governor named Woodrow Wilson, yes, the future president, New Jersey tightened those laws, cracking down on the very corporations it had courted. And the corporations did what corporations do. They left. Delaware was waiting. It had quietly copied New Jersey's old business-friendly approach almost word for word, and now it simply opened the door. The companies walked in and they never really left. From that moment, Delaware made a deliberate, century-long bet that it could become the place where companies choose to legally exist and turn that into a permanent source of income. It's a bet that paid off beyond anything its lawmakers could have imagined. So what exactly is Delaware selling? The first thing is a court most people have never heard of, and it might be the single most important business institution in America, the Delaware Court of Chancery. Most courts you can imagine involve a jury, ordinary citizens deciding the outcome. The Court of Chancery has no juries. Cases are decided by a small number of judges called chancellors who do almost nothing but corporate law, all day for years. They are specialists, and because this court has been handling business disputes since 1792, it sits on top of more than 2 centuries of accumulated decisions. Here's why that matters more than it sounds. When 2 companies fight over a merger, a buyout, a boardroom power struggle, the thing they fear most isn't losing, it's uncertainty. A surprising ruling from a judge who doesn't understand the business can cost billions. In Delaware, that almost never happens. Because nearly every kind of corporate dispute has already been litigated, lawyers can predict how a case will go with stunning accuracy. So Delaware doesn't really sell incorporation, it sells predictability. And for a corporation, predictability is worth more than almost anything. The second reason is the law itself. Delaware's corporate code, the rules for how a company is run, who has power, what directors can and can't do, is widely considered the most flexible and management friendly in the country, and it stays that way on purpose. Delaware has a permanent incentive to keep its corporate law attractive, so it's constantly updated by experts who treat it less like legislation and more like a product they're maintaining. When a new kind of business problem appears, Delaware tends to write the rules for it first, and everyone else follows. The result is a strange kind of authority, a state of about 1 million people effectively writing the operating manual for corporate America. But predictability and good law are only half the story. The other half is money, and this is where it gets controversial. Delaware offers two financial advantages that are perfectly legal and quietly enormous. The first is privacy. When you form a company in Delaware, you generally don't have to publicly list the names of the people who own or control it. That anonymity is useful for legitimate businesses and extremely useful for hiding ownership, which is why shell companies and anonymous money are a recurring criticism of the system. The second advantage drains money out of other states. It's sometimes called the Delaware loophole. Here's the simplified version. A company creates a second company in Delaware, a holding company, and hands down its ownership of valuable intangible things, brand names, trademarks, logos, patents. Then the real operating business in another state pays its own Delaware holding company a fee to use those trademarks. That payment is a deductible expense back home, lowering the taxes it owes there. And Delaware doesn't tax that kind of intangible income. Here's one real and famous example. A major American toy retailer set up a Delaware subsidiary whose whole job was to own its cartoon giraffe mascot. Every one of its stores across the country then paid that subsidiary to use the mascot. In a single year, that one subsidiary collected around $55 million in royalties this way, income that went largely untaxed. Multiply that across thousands of major companies, and other states lose enormous sums every year, while Delaware collects the fees. Now you'd expect other states to simply copy Delaware and take the business. Some have tried, almost none have succeeded, and the reason reveals the real engine underneath all of this. It's a self-reinforcing loop. Because so many companies are already in Delaware, that's where all the case law is. Because that's where the case law is, that's what every corporate lawyer in America learns. Because that's what the lawyers know, that's what they advise their clients to choose. And because clients keep choosing Delaware, even more case law piles up. Each new company makes the system more predictable, which attracts the next. A rival state starting today would have none of that history, and no company wants to be the test case that builds someone else's precedent from scratch. Delaware didn't just get a head start, it built a moat that gets deeper every single year, and the state has every reason to protect it. Corporate fees and franchise taxes are one of the largest pillars of Delaware's budget. By recent figures, close to a third of the money the state runs on, and its second biggest source of revenue after personal income tax. Delaware isn't hosting corporate America as a favor, it's a business model. Its product is the law itself, and business is very, very good. So step back and look at what this actually is. A two-story building in Wilmington is the registered home of hundreds of thousands of companies. Most of corporate America is governed not by the states where it operates, but by one small state most of its customers will never visit, under rulings made by a handful of specialist judges using a body of law maintained almost like software. Critics call it a quite democratic problem. Enormous corporate power concentrated in one small place, with anonymity that makes it harder to follow money and easier to move profits away from the communities that generate them. Defenders argue the opposite, that by centralizing corporate law in one expert, predictable place, Delaware makes the whole economy run more smoothly and cheaper for everyone. Both can be true at once. But here's the part worth holding on to. None of this is a scandal hidden in a vault. It's not illegal. It's not secret. It's printed in the fine print of incorporation documents you could read right now. The system is hiding in plain sight, in a word you've seen on the bottom of 1,000 logos and never questioned. That's the missing link. Behind incorporated is an entire invisible architecture of courts, agents, holding companies, and incentives, quietly deciding how the most powerful businesses on earth are allowed to exist. And it all traces back to a quiet street in Delaware and a beige building you'd never look at twice. Hey, if you like this video, I would very much appreciate it if you subscribed, left a like, and maybe even a comment. Chances are that if you like this video, you'll like one of the two appearing on your screen right about now. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.